Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're talking about the increase in out-of-state purchases with both new and used vehicles. Before we dive into this though, I do want to mention, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. The car market has definitely changed a massive amount over the course of the last year and especially over the course of the last 6 months. And one of the big changes is there's been a huge increase in out-of-state purchases. And what I mean by this is individuals that are going and buying a car are buying cars out of state more often than what they're doing over the course of the entire pandemic. And frankly, some dealers have out-of-state purchase percentages that are bigger than what they had prior to the pandemic. I know of several dealers that almost exclusively sell cars to customers that are out of state. So first off, let's talk about the pros and cons of buying out of state versus in state, and then we'll dive into why there has been this shift to out of state purchases. So let's start things off by going over the pros with purchasing out of state. So there's two main pros that I typically see with purchasing out of state. The first one is just there's more options, right? If you widen your search radius, you're going to have more options available to you. And this is why a lot of people, frankly, will purchase out of state is they can't find what they're looking for in their area. So then they start looking elsewhere to see if they can find what they are looking for. Now, the next big pro that's becoming pretty interesting is going to be pricing, right? There are definitely price differences between different markets here in the US. The US is a massive market, and so you're going to have a bunch of little markets within the overall car market here in the US. I mean, Utah, for example, is not a very big state. We don't have a very big population, like less than 4 million people, and there are a bunch of individual car markets within the Utah market itself. And so you extrapolate that over the entirety of the US and you can see things get pretty crazy. And so because there's all these different markets, there can be pretty big price differences between different markets. You know, one theme that you'll typically see is that on the coasts, prices are typically more expensive, whereas in the interior of the US, prices on cars are typically less expensive. And it just comes down to the income of the populations within the different areas and also population density as well. And so because there are these price differences, then some people will choose to take advantage of that, right? They'll maybe sell their car in a market where it's selling for more money, and then they'll buy a car in a market where there's not selling for as much money. I mean, an example that I'll use is with Land Rover product. Here in the Utah market, I mean, there is definitely, you know, some pricing power to get over MSRP on those cars. But for the most part, what you'll see with that product here in Utah is it'll typically sell for MSRP brand new. The used ones sometimes will go for over original MSRP because the market's just, you know, hot on that product. But then if you look at that same product on the coasts of the US, Land Rovers are selling for significant premiums over MSRP. I mean, full-size Land Rovers, for example, they're selling for like $100,000 over MSRP. And so that's just an example of a, you know, market difference with, you know, one particular product. And now moving over into the cons, the biggest con, frankly, with purchasing out of state is just how time consuming it can be, because you can't just drive down the road and look at a car in person and then purchase it that day, right? You're typically calling in, you're finding out if the car is available, and if it's a used car, right, you have to get an inspection remotely, which is definitely a process. If it's a new car, right, it's a little bit easier, but there's just a lot more that has to go into it. And then, you know, every state has different rules, but typically if you purchase out of state, you are going to be the one that has to register that vehicle. The dealership that you're purchasing it from, since they're not in your state, they can't register it for you. So then you've got to go to your own DMV. And so there's all these things that add up. And then on top of that, right, there's travel costs if you choose to fly out and drive it back, or shipping costs. And so sometimes it can actually be more expensive to purchase out of state. In most cases, actually, it's more expensive than if you had purchased the same car in state, outside of, you know, some special examples where the vehicles are going for huge premiums in your particular market. But those are the general pros and cons to in-state versus out-of-state. There are more pros and cons, but those are the main ones. And so now this leads us into talking about why there has been a huge increase in people purchasing cars out of state. And let's start with the used car market. So used car availability is absolutely horrible right now. The day supply of used cars is right around 40 days, and this is on the retail side of things. And so because the day supply number is so small, there's just not a lot of options for people. And so people that are looking for, you know, a certain used car with certain options, they're having to widen their search radius quite a bit. And so this is definitely a trend that I think is going to continue into the future, because the whole used car market situation doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. And so people shopping for used cars are going to have to shop, you know, a lot farther than what they usually do. And so that's the first reason as as to why we're seeing more out-of-state purchases, because the used car market sucks. There's not a lot of cars available, and so if you want to find what you want, you're going to have to look far and wide. And then when it comes to the new car market, it actually relates to the other point I mentioned earlier in the video, and it is to pricing. There are still some pretty big price differences between different markets here in the US, where one market will be significantly more expensive than another market. And so a lot of people are basically price shopping with new cars. And the biggest reason why this is happening is because new car availability is a lot better than what it has been over the course of the last few years. I mean, you have some manufacturers that literally have 200 days worth of supply of vehicles of certain models that they have. And so when you have day supply numbers that are that big, people are obviously going to be shopping based on price rather than, just going to their closest dealer, unless their closest dealer happens to have a really good price on the product. And so I only see this trend also continuing into the future because, again, when you have such big differences in price between certain markets, it's obviously going to cause people to go to the markets where they can get a better deal. So I want you guys to let me know what you think about this whole out-of-state situation. Do you think that, I'm right in saying that this is just going to continue to increase as time goes on? Or do you think that, dealers that are losing customers to dealers that are out of their state because their pricing is too high, do you think they're finally going to bring their pricing down to keep their in-state customers? Like, what do you think is going to happen with that whole situation? Anyways, I'll see ya.